Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the KimUnity Soulutions Podcast, where we turn workplace challenges into real-world solutions. I am your host, Kim the SME. As always, I am only speaking from my experiences. It is so good to be back with you all today. Hope you have had a wonderful week. Today, we're going to be talking about the power of perspectives. The power of perspectives. Now, this topic caught my attention because of the whole Q&A. Everyone believes they have the right answer. They have the only answer. They have the best answer. And so through life, my life experiences and life challenges have taught me that we all really have perspectives. There's only one that has the only answer, the right answer, right? We all have different perspectives based off of lived and unlived experiences. And so based off of that, I'm changing Q&A to Q&P. Okay, so no more question and answers because we don't have the answer. There's multiple perspectives. So from now on, it is Q and P, questions and perspectives. And what's great about perspectives is that it invites connection. It invites connection. So let's get into it. First, I want to define both words, right? So when I looked it up in the Merriam dictionary, question is defined as an act or an instance of asking. It's open for discussion, or it could be considered as to torture as part of an examination, right? Room for doubt or objection. Perspective, Merriam-Webster defines it as a mental view or prospect. It's a point of view, the capacity to view things in their true relation or relative importance. And so when we hear the word relative, we hear that, okay, well, that's relative. It's based off of your experiences. It's based off of, what you've been through, your background, your knowledge. And so that's why it's so important to have different perspectives in the room when you are making decisions, because you're getting more of a worldview. You're getting more insight because there's more vision. It is so easy to get a misunderstanding off of a question. Sometimes questions can be misleading. You can be asked a question and then sit back because you're not sure where it's going to go. You're not sure why they're asking that question or where it's leading to. This happens everywhere. It even happens in the workplace. And one experience that I recall is me going to my senior asking her a question. And when I asked her, she looked at me and then said, "Ask me again." So she's thrown off by my question. Now I'm thrown off by her question because she's asking me to ask it again. But later on, I would grow to appreciate that. That was her approach of getting clarity. So if she didn't understand the first way I asked, she would say, "Ask me again." And I realized that after answering her and really trying to analyze, okay, where are we going with this? What are you trying to get out of it? But really she was seeking more information. She wanted to make sure that she understood correctly. So I just defined what questions was. One of it was torture as part of an examination. So I was thinking it was an examination, but really it was for clarity, right? It wasn't really for torture or a setup or anything like that. She just really wanted to know more information. And that is something that I now use. You can learn from anyone. You can learn from anyone. But what I've learned is that questions are very helpful. On the other side of that are the answers. Everyone believes that they have the right answer or the only answer or the only correct answer or the quickest way to get there. And then you can turn the channel and see someone else with a totally different method. So that's why I say it should be questions and perspectives and not questions and answers, because none of us have the answer. But collectively, can you imagine if we all got together and shared our perspectives on, let's say, a problem? If there was a problem, how would you fix this one thing in the world? And everyone shared their perspectives. That solution would be 1,000-fold times better than anything else because we're sharing a different point of view. so that we're able to look at more angles of the problem and come up with better solutions. And that's what it's all about. It's about finding mutually beneficial solutions. For example, I can ask you right now, what is the best way to pay off debt? And some may chime in and say, oh, you should pay, if you have a lot of credit cards, you should pay the lowest balance first. Right? Now that is the Dave Ramsey way. He says you should pay the lowest balance first because you start creating a snowball effect. Because after you pay that one, instead of paying all of these minimum payments and you pay off that one, now you can add that to the minimum that you were paying to something else. Right? So you're creating a snowball effect. Now, if someone else was to answer it, they may say, no, you should pay your highest percentage, your highest interest rate off first. Someone else may say, you should consolidate. Now, all of these may work. There's no one answer, but it depends on what you're looking for at the end, right? But just having those different perspectives, there's not just one way. There's not just one way to lose weight. There's the Atkins diet. There's the paleo. There's, keto. There's so many different ways to lose weight. My uncle says anything will work if you work it. Some people will say you need to do cardio first. Other people will say you need to lift weights. Weight training is better. These are all perspectives. And that's what we're speaking about today, is sharing your perspective so we all can win together. When I hear questions and answers, I'm thinking about, okay, who can come up with the answer the fastest? There's a right and wrong. There's a limited options for you to be right. But when we say the word perspectives, we know that there's going to be many different approaches. It allows for more than one. And this is what we need in our communities, in our homes. We have to have that understanding, listening to other people's point of view, listening to their viewpoints. That's how you get things accomplished in the workplace. I don't know about your workplace, but I recall working in a corporation, and upper management would always be the ones going to the conferences, going to the trainings on softwares and things like that, right? It was always upper management going. It was never the ones that were actually using the software, that were using it daily, that had the most knowledge. And so they would go to these conferences, and then they would come back with all of this information. And then they want to implement all of the things that they've learned. But what happens is, excuse me for one moment. How often do we push for open communication only to get silence instead? At some point, we have to realize that people don't shut down because they're considered that they don't care, or they're considered to be an introvert or antisocial, or maybe not even a team player. No, they shut down because they don't feel safe. The questions and perspective cards were created for that exact space, a space that allows people to process, to reflect, and to share at their own pace, that respects their comfort, their story, and their voice. People do want to share something that's real, but on their terms. These cards are open-ended, non-intrusive questions that allow people to show up as they truly are. If you're ready for conversations where truth is allowed to unfold and give deeper insight and understanding to those we share space with, visit QandPcards.com. QandPcards.com. It's not about being the loudest or the most outgoing in the room. Give people the safety to share, not the pressure to perform. Get your deck at Q&P Cards today and show your team and those around you that you care. When you don't take the people who are really knowledgeable in that area or who are using it, who can ask the right questions to make sure that software applies to your current situation, then it becomes invalid. It becomes your solution becomes invalid because you're not incorporating all of the perspectives that you need. And so what happens is they come back and they have these grand ideas. They're ready to implement. They've spoken to senior leadership, and they're like, "Yeah, let's go with that. We're going to start implementing that, and I want it done, in 90 days." And then they come to the team telling front line what they want, only to find out that it can't be done, or more changes are needed in order to implement it, or they forgot that this is needed first before this. So they're not really understanding the flow of information sometimes, or the steps that's needed, or the requirements. And so what I've always tried to encourage is that for people who are the front line, people are actually using the software to go to these conferences. And thankfully, they did make that change in the organization. And I was able to go and come back with actual improvements, process improvements from the conference that I could apply, because I went into the conference with questions as they demonstrate, as they, are speaking about the different processes, and you would raise your hand and say, "Okay, well, I can do this and I can do that. Does it do this? How can I make it fit our industry? Our files look like this." And these are inquiries that are necessary to make, proper decisions. So I encourage anyone that's in management and leadership that when you are trying to make process improvements, when you are trying to do upgrades, make sure that you incorporate the people who are actually working with it, because you need their perspectives. You need their knowledge base. You need to know, the details, the minute details of how that system will work in your industry, in your workplace. I say all of this to say that we need more collaboration. We need to be working together more to find solutions, whether it's in the workplace or at home or in your community. By having diversity and having, diverse ideas and viewpoints, you can create better change for everyone. I actually remember doing a speech, and the title of it was Your Own Grandmother. And I wanted everyone to think of their grandmother. I wanted everyone to think about, how you treated each other, and the way that you're, let's say somebody, let's say somebody older drove out in front of you. They cut you off on the freeway. If that was your grandmother, would you want people honking at her? I mean, she's already cut you off. There's nothing really else you can do. But I'm thinking, in my mind, okay, if I honk, she may have a heart attack, or, it might panic, or it might startle her. And then it'll create a different outcome. And so in the speech, I'm talking about, okay, treat people as you would want your grandmother to be treated. And towards the end of this speech, I said, now say your grandmother's name. Say your grandmother's name. And after the speech, so I got a round of applause and everything. And at the end of the speech, someone stood up and said, that was so powerful. And I really enjoyed that. But he was from a different country. And he said, now I need to go back and find out my grandmother's name, because I don't know my grandmother's name. Because I don't know my grandmother's name. It was disrespectful to call your grandmother by their name. We always said grandmother in their language. And I was just like, wow. His eyes were open because I said, say your grandmother's name. But on the other end of that, my eyes are open because I'm thinking, wow, some people don't know their own grandmother's name. right? Some people, and it makes you put yourself in their shoes. It makes you, it broadens up your thought process. Had I known that before I delivered the speech, I wonder if I would have left that part out, say your grandmother's name. Because you don't know what people are going through. You don't know people's lived experiences. You don't know their background or their family practices, their religious background. Like, you don't know that. But that moment opened up everyone's eyes, including my own, because it's not something that I thought about. I'm thinking, okay, when I ask people to say their own grandmother's name, that will make them think twice about how they treat somebody else. But this gentleman did not even know his grandmother's name. So he's out on a journey trying to find that. So that's why it's so important to speak to other people, have conversation and move away from small talk. Move away from small talk. And that's why I have created a card deck, a conversation card deck, like icebreakers. And they're called questions and perspectives because I always want to learn more about people. I don't want to keep it at surface level and not even just about their personal life, but how they think. What am I missing? What could I learn from you? What could you learn from me? What's something that you can learn that you can apply in the future? Questions and perspectives. I will include the link below to the card deck and even include a link to the free preview. And it gives you 5 cards that are in the deck, and it breaks down on what the benefits are of asking this question, right? And I want you to just, download it and ask yourself these questions. Ask the people around you these questions. They're clean questions. They're not perverted or anything like that, but it's about having more conversations and understanding how people think and why they react a certain way. You could be working with someone and then you prejudge them. You think because they didn't speak to you that morning that they have an attitude or, but really they need their coffee in the morning. Or they're doing their morning prayer in the morning. So that's why they're not, opening their door, or you just don't know. You're not being avoided. You're not being disrespected. But by asking questions and getting more clarity, you have a better understanding of who that person is. And in the workplace, that's how you get higher productivity. That's how you get respect. It's not based off of your title. Your title only determines your level of pay, not your level of respect. People want to know that they're seen. People, and I was going to say not too seen, but people want to know that they're seen and that they're valued. And I'm not saying that they're going to come off and share all of their personal information with you. That's not what I'm saying. But these cards allow you to, say what you're comfortable with saying. Say what you're comfortable saying. But what happens is you're going off to these lunch events. You all are having the group pizza party, or you're asking people how their weekend was, and they don't want to share that information with you. That's private information. They don't want that used against them later. But if you go and ask them, what is more important, right? Your first name or your last name? Not theirs specifically, but anyone's. Then that has people thinking. Some will say first. Some will say last. And there's multiple reasons of why they would say either. But I want you to discover those in your conversations. And you would be surprised at what you will hear. You would be surprised. I remember asking someone, I was getting a pedicure and a manicure, mani-pedi. And I had passed the cards around, and this one lady answered the question. I don't recall what the question was, but her answer was, if I was to do anything, it would be to stay home and feed turtles. Like, wow. I've never even thought of that. She said it's just so peaceful. And so now I'm envisioning that. The slowness of it. There's no rush. There's, then it makes you think, okay, why would she think that? That's what she likes. You would be amazed at what you would learn about people when you just have a conversation. And the times that we're in now, I think that's what it's all about. It's about understanding people at a human level. What can someone learn from you? You don't have to divulge your secrets and all that, but what is something someone can learn from you? It's not about questions and answers. It's about perspectives. I hope you all have enjoyed this episode. This has been on my list to talk about because I'm always seeing, top 5 reasons or top 5 or answers to this or answers to that. And I really want us to get out of the thought of answers. And this is the only way. The strictness of it, the limitations of answers. Because your answer could be great in one season and then horrible in another. Right? But it's about sharing perspectives and getting understanding and extending grace. Extending grace. There are multiple reasons. Oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could do that. There are multiple reasons why perspectives are more important. I've already talked about how different people have different lenses, but also it sparks creativity. It sparks creativity because if I already have an idea or perspective in my mind, and then I hear yours, and I think, oh, okay. And then there's something that can be combined there. It's like a whole nother world, right? It also reduces biases and blind spots. We see these commercials that where companies are end up getting sued because they did something that they didn't know was racially biased. It's because the right people aren't in the room to give you that lens. So it's a cost saver. It lowers your expenses. This impacts your bottom line. It truly does. So again, I hope you have enjoyed this episode. I am your host, Kim the SME. As always, I am only speaking from my experiences. I hope you go out and learn more about the people that you're around, even in your own family. Not just a how was school, how was work. But what do you think about this? And it's not about judging. It's about understanding. It's about discovering. That's what it's about. Until next time, I'm your host, Kim the SME. You all be blessed.